Hey, what's up guys? Pascal here and welcome to a new SAP S/4HANA Cloud Knowledge snippet. In today's snippet, I am super pumped because we are going to be looking at a new functionality that I think rounds off really nicely the capabilities that we offer in SAP S/4HANA Cloud within the context of manufacturing. To be more specific, with the 1902 release to supplement the Work Center capacity monitoring apps that we delivered in the previous release, we are now also providing in 1902 a capacity leveling capability. Now, understandably, this is the first foray into this particular capability, but I really do believe that it is going to dramatically help production planners more successfully streamline their production plans, make better use of their assets. So before we really dive into the features of this capability, there's a couple of things that I want to attract your attention to. And for that, let's go to the Fiori apps library. So let's go and have a look at what you want to do is when you go to the Fiori apps library, you want to find the application called Schedule Production, which is the new Fiori application that has been released in the 1902 release. And at the bottom here, you have a link, which is the app documentation. And in the app documentation, of course, read all of it, but there are prerequisites that are of the utmost importance. And in particular, I want to stress this second point here, which is maintain the right production line in the production version. Otherwise, you're not going to see anything in your application. So this is a key feature or key aspect of this particular application if you want it to work. So let's have a look at a material and see exactly what we mean by that. So I have a material, which is the one that I'll be using for this particular snippet. Let's go to the work scheduling view of that material and look at the production versions. And you'll see that for this material, I have created several production versions. So if I go into the first one, and the piece of information that the help was talking about, which is here where it says maintain the right production line in the production version, in the material, down here at the bottom in the repetitive manufacturing section, there is this field called production line, and that is where you are supposed to indicate a work center. Now, the application schedule production is there to help you plan the cadence setting work center or the bottleneck. It's unrealistic to try and plan everything in your routing. So the idea is that you plan the pacemaker, the cadence setting work center, the one that is, so to speak, going to beat the drums of how your manufacturing operation runs. Or if you have a production work center that is often overloaded and becomes a bottleneck, then of course that's where you want to level the capacity over a certain horizon. So as I said, really important, if you don't indicate the cadence setter or the bottleneck work center in the production version, when you go into the app schedule production, you're not going to see anything. Now I'm just going to close this particular window here, and you can see that I have got 3 production versions. Now the idea is, of course, that the production version is going to be selected either based on the date, maybe based on the lot size that I am manufacturing, but you also have, as we'll see in a moment in the schedule production application, the ability to switch yourself the production version that you're going to be using. And it could be that you are, for example, going to be selecting the high-speed line, because it could be that you have a lot size that calls for a machine that has a bigger capacity, but it might also come at a bigger cost, which is why you're not selecting it by default. It could also be that your standard or default packaging line, for example, is always overloaded and you want to go to this high-speed packing line. So different decisions that you can make. And I've also indicated here another production version, which is assembly line. Because if you recall, as I said, the schedule production application is there to plan the pacemaker, the cadence setter, or the bottleneck work center. And because in the production version, you can only indicate one work center, you can quickly understand that this might cause a few planning problems if you have a routing that has 2, 3 work centers, because you can only plan one. Again, I stress the fact that you plan the bottleneck or the pacemaker operation. But it could be that depending on the products that you're manufacturing, the number of products that are using a specific work center, it could be that in a week, your packing line might be your bottleneck work center, and it could be that in another week, your bottleneck could be your assembly line. So what I've done here is that both of these production versions call on the exact same routing, but in each of these production versions, I've indicated a different work center. So that's going to help me flip-flop between the packing line or the assembly line, depending on which week I'm in and which week and which work center is my bottleneck. So that's the basic master data that you absolutely have to maintain. Again, I'm going to quickly show it to you. In the production version, you have to maintain the production line. Whether you are using repetitive manufacturing or not, it's of no importance here, but you have to maintain this information. Otherwise, as I said, when you go into the app schedule production, you will not be seeing any data popping up. Okay, so now that we've covered the basics, let's dive right in and look at how we can level the capacity requirements of my work centers. Now, every production scheduler or planner is going to have his own workflow, his own routine about how he goes about planning his work centers. In S/4HANA Cloud, I would recommend that you have a dual screen approach, and by that I mean that you have in one screen the Manage Work Center Capacity application open, and that's going to help you kind of laser focus those areas where you do have bottlenecks, where you have an overload on your work centers, which is also synonymous of the fact that the current production plan that you have is not realistic because your capacity needs are greater than what you actually have available. And you can also see that there is a couple of capacities here that are showing some red spikes, i.e. some overload. So I've got the person capacity, but I'm not going to worry too much about this one because I'm going to assume that for the packing, fairly unskilled labor can perform these packing operations. And if my own in-house personnel doesn't cover my requirements, I can always reach out to a temp agency to kind of fill those requirements that I have and cannot meet with my internal resources. But where I do need to worry a bit more is for my machines, and my machines can only run at 100% capacity. They can't do any more than that. So I need to solve for those red spikes. And this chart here is going to help me, as I said, exactly focus on those areas that I do need to resolve. So already here I've got, of course, the visual cues that I'm overloaded. I have the maximum load is also showing up here, which means that I do have on some days up to 218% of my work centers loaded. So of course what you can do in this application is you can simply click on one of those lines, which then gives you a detail per day over the horizon that you have chosen, which in this case is 14 days. And quite rightly so, I can see that I have some days where I am exceeding the 100% available capacity of my work centers. And what you can do, of course, is you can click on those areas of concern, click on View Operations to see exactly which are the order operations that are inducing this load on that particular work center in that particular period. Now, the other reason why I say that this is a good starting point is because you can, once you finish the production leveling of your work centers, you can then of course come back here, refresh the screen just to make sure that everything has been smoothed out and you don't see those red spikes appear in your plan anymore. So let's go ahead and go to the schedule production application, which is the one that allows me to level my capacity on my work centers. So this is the other application that, of course, you have to use if you are going to want to leverage this functionality of leveling the capacity of your work centers. And the first thing that you need to do in order to be able to use this app is to define a horizon, i.e. in what horizon are you looking to allocate the available capacity of your work centers to your production order operations or planned order operations. And this tool, what you have to understand is that it is definitely made to plan the short term, maybe going into the medium term, but definitely not the long term. So I'm going to be planning next week's production, and so to that extent I'm going to pick the 25th, and the way that this picker works is that you need to select a start and a finish date, and I'm going to go out into Friday, and then you can also of course indicate additional selection criteria depending on how complex your operations are. I'm just going to go with my horizon. So the system now presents to me a certain number of order operations, and as I said, it's only showing those to me because in the production version of my material I've indicated in the production version of my material I've indicated a production line. And the other thing to note is that you have this warning at the top here where the system tells you that you are currently in simulation mode and your changes will not be saved until you click save. So that means that you are potentially going to be doing a series of allocations, dispatching of operations, deallocate, reallocate, and what you have to understand with this message is that whatever you do is not going to be committed to the database until you click save. So any of those changes that you make are not going to affect your production orders dates until you click that save button. Another aspect that is available that is of importance in this application is the set strategy. And in the set strategy, you have from a scheduling control two possible values, which is finite scheduling. So you do take into account the available capacity of that work center as opposed to infinite capacity where you don't really take it into account and you can overload your work center by as much as you like. Personally, I think it might defeat the purpose of what it is that we're trying to do here. But it could be that in some cases you will want to plan infinitely a work center, and especially if it's further out into the future, and as you get closer to it you might want to refine that and schedule finitely the capacity of your work centers. So I'm just going to stick with the finite scheduling, and then you have the directions. So do I go from a date backwards in the past to schedule the and find the start date, or do I schedule from a start date and let the system calculate the end date? I'm going to go with backwards. And the other thing that I want to do in this particular report here is kind of tweak the information that's available, and the source of supply at this point I'm not super interested in that, so I'm going to get rid of that. Also the operation end, I want to keep the latest end date, not the operation end, which in my case are going to be the same anyway. And what I want to have in mind here as well is the requirement date, because of course I don't want to try and execute the planning of my orders only to then realize that I have planned those orders at dates that don't actually match or meet up with my customer requirements or my other production requirements. And what you also have to understand here is that the requirement date is not necessarily the requirement date of your customer order. In this case, this is the requirement date which is dictated by the end date of, in this case, the production order. And the assumption here is that the MRP would have run, looked at a requirement, created a replenishment proposal for it, and I converted this replenishment proposal, this plan order, into production order with the dates that the MRP had come up with. So obviously at this point in time, my production or my product availability date matches with my customer requirement date, but you do have to understand that this is the end of the production order at the moment. It doesn't necessarily mean my customer requirement date, so be mindful of that as well. And then the other thing that you can do here is you could potentially tweak some more the dates, and I want to sort based on the ascending date of the requirement so that I can see what is my immediate requirements, and as I go out into the future, what are my requirements towards the end of the week. Now, another piece of information that I can see right off the bat here when I'm into this first screen is down here at the bottom that the system is trying to bring my attention to the fact that I have this operation which is requesting 20.33 hours of capacity. And 20.33 hours of capacity, considering that on average my work centers work 8 hours a day, that's going to be a production order operation that's going to take a lot of time to process. So I might want to do something a little bit specific with that particular order. And I can also see that it's calling for a quantity of 600 pieces, which means that it's there to fulfill either one very big requirement or multiple smaller requirements. And of course, if I miss this particular window, then I'm going to have a lot of my customers being unhappy. So it's quite important that I plan this accordingly, or give it the priority and the attention that it deserves. So in this particular screen, what you could do already is, let's say you have this particular production order operation where the system has said that it's planning to dispatch it on this particular date. You might say, well, you know what, that works for me, that's okay, I'm happy with that. And what you could do at this point in time already, you could just select the operation and click on dispatch, and those dates would then be locked in into my production order, and this operation would then be considered dispatched. In other words, I would have allocated, I would have booked some of that available capacity of my work center on that date and time to that particular production order, and unless I deallocate this particular production order operation, no one's going to take that away from me. But I want to have a bit of a broader view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plan all of my operations together. And the way that you do that is simply you click on any one of those lines that you have here, and the system then splits the screen in two. And on the left hand side, you have still that list of orders that we saw just 2 seconds ago. And you can widen that left pane if you want to get a bit more clarity on the information that is presented on the left. You can close it up again. And on the right, you have the active production order. In other words, this is the production order operation that corresponds to the line that I clicked in the previous screen. So just be mindful of that. And this information is of course recapped up here at the top. So it's always telling you what is the active production order that you are trying to dispatch. And if you recall, the very last order that we had was one for 600 pieces. And this one, I know it's going to cause me a lot of trouble because you see it's calling for 20.33 hours of capacity, and I've got 8 hours per day. So I already, just looking at this, I know that it's going to take me 2 and a bit days to be able to fulfill just this one production order. Granted, it's for a big quantity, but all of my other orders, they're going to be kicking and screaming to have some capacity which is just not available because this big work center, this big production order is taking up almost half the capacity available in that week. So the choices that I have here is that I have different production versions for this one material. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, you know what, this is a big order that I can't afford have it hog all of the available capacity for the week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule it to another production line. And I've got this other work center, this other production line, which is a high-speed processing production line. It's a lot quicker. It can process much bigger quantities, much quicker than my other production line. It's going to be more expensive, yes, because it's a more state-of-the-art manufacturing work center, for example, but I need to use it. So what I'm going to do here is, for this particular production order of 300, I'm going to switch the production version, which of course is going to dictate a new routing. And already you can see here that just by switching to this new production line, the capacity requirement has gone down from 20 odd hours down to 1 hour, 0.08, which just kind of shows you that the cadence of this high-speed line is going to help me absorb the throughput required by this work center. Now, the next thing that I need to do is I need to position it in time. And what I could do is I could say, well, you know what, I don't know what the rest of the week could bring to me, so maybe I'll choose to position this at the beginning of the week, even though if I look at the order requirement date, which is the last one, it's not due before the 1st of the 3rd. So I could say I'm going to cut it close. I'll do it on Thursday. But of course, if my machine breaks down on Thursday, then I'm not going to be able to meet my deadline on Friday. It could also be that I've got other orders that are going to be trickling in, and I don't want to replan it midweek. So I'm going to say that I'm going to plan this particular order at the beginning of the week. So I'll position it on Monday. And to do that, I simply click the time bucket that corresponds to the day where I want to plan this production order operation. And I'm going to put it here. So the system highlights it in green just to show me that this is the time bucket that I have selected. And if I'm happy with my choice, then I'll just say dispatch. So this order has now been, this production order has now been, this operation has been dispatched to my high-speed line, production version 02. Some of the available capacity, 1.08 hours of my work center, has now been reduced, and the system tells me by this icon that some orders are assigned to this time bucket and production version and work center. But I still have 6.92 hours of capacity available. So I could potentially run other production orders on this day on that production line if I wanted to. Now, I'm just going to say I'm quite happy with what I've done here. And what you can also do at any one point in time, and especially if you have several orders being planned to the same time bucket, you can click on Review Dispatch Orders, and it's going to bring up a little pop-up just to kind of remind you what it is that you're planning to have run on that day, on that work center. And you can again do some quick changes. So for example, you could say, I'm not happy with this production allocation. So you're going to pick this operation and deallocate it. But I'm quite happy with what I've done with this particular production order operation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say save. So this is now committed to the database. And if I look at this production order, I will see that the times, dates, and operations and work centers of that production order have been changed on the basis of this allocation that I've done here. Okay, so now the other thing that I want to do, because the system is still showing me 8 orders, I want to, let me just quickly have a quick look again. Let me have a quick look just to make sure I didn't dispatch the wrong one. No, it is the right one, 600. Okay, so now we can also see that this production order has obviously changed in the where it is in the list because of my sort by ascending requirement date. So this is also what I was telling you earlier on, which is that the requirement date has now changed to the 26th of the 2nd. If you recall, previously it was the 1st of the 3rd, and it's now changed to the 26th of the 2nd. But again, just wanting to highlight that this is not necessarily my customer requirement date, so you have to be mindful of that. But the other thing that has changed is that this order operation has now changed its status to dispatched. And I don't want to have to keep on seeing it because I've saved this change to my database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another filter now to say, I just want to see the ones that haven't been dispatched. And of course, that's going to reduce my my work list. So I don't have to, keep going up and down, scrolling up and down my screen all the time. Okay, so now that I've filtered by the not dispatched operations, I have my list that has been reduced to 7 orders. So again, I can have a quick look at where I am, what my situation is. So I've got these 7 orders. I've got quantity of 6, 28, 150, 90. I'm looking at my dates. Okay, so everything that I have is due to be at the 1st or the 3rd, of course, at the latest. And let's see my capacity requirements. So this one is 4.33, this one is 0.93. Okay, so let's go back into the leveling mode, if you like. And what we're going to do is we are going to pick the first order operation that has been sorted based on the requirement date. Now also note that currently the order that I could potentially plan has a finish date of the 28th. I'm going to click on this one here, and you will see that the calendar that is presented to me by default has been adjusted based on the requirement date. And it's essentially a bit of a reminder to say to me, well, you need to finish off at the latest on the 25th at close of business in order to meet your requirement of the 26th, which is why it's not showing me the 26th as a date. At least there is no incentive for me to try and plan this production order on the 26th, because then it's going to be overdue. However, what you can of course do is you can override this setting by, for example, saying, no, I do want to see up to 26 or maybe even a couple of days later on. Or depending on where you're in the time horizon, you could also extend towards the present. It really is up to you, but you can absolutely change the planning horizon. So this order here, which is due for the 26th, which is the Tuesday, I don't really have a choice because I want to get this over. So I'm trying to plan next week. So what I'm going to say is that this particular order, which is 180, I'm going to be planning it on Monday. I need to push this one out to the next day, or I could also push it out a bit further on in the week, because as you can see, the requirement date is the 1st of the 3rd, so I could potentially put it on Thursday if I thought that there was going to be more work coming in on Thursday or Wednesday. Now I want to get this over and done with as quickly as possible, so I'm going to also assign this order operation on the Wednesday, and I'm going to say dispatch. So all my work list has now disappeared. I've planned all of my production order operations. I'm happy with what has been done. I'm just going to save it, because if you recall, I was still in simulation mode. So all the changes, all the planning changes that I have done have now been committed to the database. I can go back to the main screen of the schedule production application, and the difference now is that you can see that all of my order operations have the status of dispatch. So this is now also going to be a hard constraint for the scheduling of these production orders. And lastly, if we now go back to manage work center capacity and refresh the screen, we should hopefully see that all of these red spikes have disappeared. So let's go ahead and refresh that screen. And there we go. Now you can see that all of those red spikes have gone. I have some orange spikes coming up, but to some extent orange spikes is synonymous of good, I think. It means that you're nearing the 100% utilization of your work center, so you are sweating your assets correctly, you're fully making use of those. But certainly what this also shows is that we have successfully leveled the capacity requirement, and I now have a realistic production plan. Now, as a result of this adjustment, of course, it's going to have an effect on MRP, in that potentially MRP will say that you need to move some requirements or some purchase orders forward or push them out. But that is unfortunately one of the realities of this fast-changing world that we live in. So there you go. I hope that this was informative. If you did like this video, then don't forget to like it, subscribe to our channel for more, and we hope to see you again very soon. Thank you for your time.